It's your boy Matt here. Look, first of all, I made a video where I was mentioned Jordan Peterson, and I said bitch a few times in that. I never called Jordan Peterson a bitch. I said he owes me money, right? Um, I have a lot of differences in politics to Jordan. I think he's a guy from a different time, and he's a guy from a different place to me. When him and I interact, we're trying. We are community leaders. Our job is to be civil with each other. And there is greater opportunity for civility and for us to get cooperation together and showcase that cooperation than there is in, say, Parliament in question time. You look at politicians and the game they have to play with each other, the ones who are elected in our system. They spend their time yelling at each other, bitching and moaning, and constantly undermining each other. Him and I are both social scientists. Like, he is a psychologist. I disagree with a lot of his stuff. I think, particularly with developmental psychology, I don't like when he talks about ADHD and these things. To me, as a person who's worked with real developmental psychologists and not... And these people aren't neo-Marxists. Like, I'm frustrated with how he uses that language. I've worked with legitimate economic historians like Phil Griffith. The way that he defines these words isn't accurate. There is not the amount that this guy has taken on in his life, like in his role as the normal person, smart person, is beyond what any human is able to provide. And he's tried I have no doubt that he has tried his best to fulfill that role. He's actually really fucked up in a whole lot of different areas. He's made some incredible mistakes. I would expect any person who's tried to take on that responsibility to make incredible mistakes. And I understand why he chose to do that. That's why I delegated captains, right? I delegated captains to create a movement and gave them authorities. Jordan Peterson is in some ways a prototype. And I'm not saying this like for a very different political movement, very different. I seriously don't want to be associated with him, my movement to be associated with him in a political sense, although I'm happy for him to participate because the point of us, look, is to find common ground between conservatives and more liberal people. People who are, I'm using that sense in the global sense, not in the Australian sense, because it means a different thing in Australia. But in the United States, liberal means freedom. And I want individuals to have rights. I want people to be free to have a good life. There's a concept called social democracy, and I think Jordan will actually agree with this concept, although that name's social because he grew up in the Cold War and he has a proclivity for orderliness and like very defined boundaries. And the problem with that is that you have to spend all your time, if you're going to have an accurate view of the world, defining those boundaries. And he's going to have to spend all his time defining those boundaries. And there's an anxiety that he experiences. There's probably enough videos of me on, I'm saying this as a person who's listened to a lot of his work, right? And I'm not saying this in a prescriptive sense. I'm not saying I'm certain this is what you are, Jordan Peterson, right? That would be so fucking rude. But him and I are public figures. We're both viewing each other. Whenever there's an opportunity for goodwill, I want to take it. But the way he classifies things, it's inaccurate, and I think it's a result of the extent of the responsibility he's tried to take on. I think he needed, when his political movement started, he may have first of all, he comes from Canada, okay? He comes from a different political ecosystem to me. In Australia, we have issues since COVID with ARPA having too much authority. Australia has a different set of issues. Australia has issues. Canada seems to have been overly politically correct. I don't like political correctness too much. I want people to have free speech, and I value free speech over political correctness. But I also acknowledge that we need to be careful that we don't hurt people. Like, I've been accused of pedophilia. Like, I need protection because of the situations I've been in. But I view Jordan Peterson, I don't view him as a comrade, all right? And I view him as a colleague, and a colleague who, when possible, I want to have friendly relations with. And that's for two reasons. One's personal, because I grew up listening to his work, and a lot of it's quite good. There's enough of it which is worrying to me that I need to caution taking his word as gospel, because a lot of it's, I'm sorry, Jordan, your stuff on developmental psychology is crap. But he's a decent enough bloke, right? He comes from a conservative community, and there are going to be people who are part of the psychological, who have those personality traits or are part of those communities who need leadership. And you can do a lot worse than Jordan. A lot worse, right? And as much as possible, I want to get along with this guy. And if it's possible for us to even have positive moments together and be friends or something approaching friends, I'd prefer that. And if there's opportunities for collaboration, I want to have it. I do need to say that we've become quite different people over the years. And when I was younger, I quite idolized Jordan. But now, as I've spent time in the field and can actually call myself as a psychologist, a provisional psychologist at the moment until that registration lapses potentially, but as a legitimate social scientist, to say that I have learned enough, and I've been honest with myself through this time, to say that I can relate to Jordan Peterson, but I also think a lot of his work is crap. And I think I empathize with the position he's in, and I understand how some of it has become crap. Like, he's been placed in some impossible situations, and as a person who has really dwindled down to becoming an alcoholic mess for a significant period of their life now, like, there's a large amount of grace when I say this. It's not coming from a place of like, I need you to feel small, right? It's coming from a place of, oh yeah, this guy's been through some shit. I can see how he's developed into a situation where he's sometimes providing shit advice and counsel. I could also see him as a guy who is my peer. He's legitimately a psychologist. I dislike how at one point people went after his registration. That was complete nonsense. And whenever there's operation for collaboration, I want to take that. And if there's any operation for any situation when him and I can get along and experience positive emotions, I want to take that as well, because he did some of the training for me. I owe this guy a bit, and he also interacted with me, right? I owe some of my success to this gentleman, and he is a gentleman. Sometimes he's a bit of a cunt, but he's a gentleman, and he's a person who I don't want bad things to happen to. I do have concerns about his audience and things, but that's, he is a psychologist, let's be clear. And he's a person who I wish to have, I don't wish this guy to suffer. I wish him to have a very good life, and he's done a lot of good. Anyone in his position's going to have done a lot of bad as well, and he has. But I have empathy and understand his position, and I think a lot of people on the left need to acknowledge that, and I think he needs to be celebrated as a person who has been a champion of free speech and the rights of individuals, and that is something to be celebrated. So let's celebrate that aspect, and work together at least on that aspect. Have a good evening, everyone.